It is too. Say it again, I'll punch you in the mouth. I dare you.
You boys, stop right this minute. I will not have you spitting and scratching. Do you hear me, lads? I said stop it. Now, what in the world is this all about? Matt, you tell me the truth now.
Stephen said that my family was slaves.
Stephen, what are you talking about?
Well, my mama, she said you used to be slave, Grandma Ashby.
That's true, I was once.
In the law, it says if a mother is a slave, her children are slaves.
That is the law, Stephen.
So if you were a slave, that means your children, even Matt's father, are slave. Your whole family is slave. Ain't I right?
Well, not exactly.
You tell him, Grandma.
Now hush you, Matthew. Stephen here understands how things are. He just doesn't know my story is all.
What do you mean, Grandma Ashby?
Stephen, I was once a slave, and so were my children. But Matt's grandpa, he changed all that. He set me free.
You mean Matt's grandpa owned you?
Yes, he did, at least for a while. Do you want to hear my story?
It's a great story. It got heroes and villains and such.
Well, your grandpa was a hero. Of that I am certain.
Will you tell us a story?
Come with me and let me see what I might do.
When we look back at early America, we think we see a time when our country was divided between people who were free and people who were slaves, white people who owned slaves, and black people who were enslaved.
But things were not always that simple. There were whites who didn't own any slaves.
And there were a few blacks who were free. I'm Christina Holmes.
And I'm Dane Cash. This program shows some of the stories we know, stories about free blacks living in the early American world of slavery and freedom.
These free black men and women were able to stand up and declare that there is no master over me.
Grandfather Matthew was a handsome man, and I fell in love with him the first time I saw him. Your grandfather was a free man. His mother was a white, his father a slave. Your great-grandmother's freedom passed on to him, but I was a slave. I belonged to Samuel Spur. After a while, Master Spur, he allowed us to see each other, and I married Matthew Ashby. And as soon as I did, he began figuring a way to set me free. And try he did. For the next 4 years, Grandpa Matthew worked tirelessly. He worked his carpentry trade, and with his horse Nero and that old cart of his, he would load and haul anything what was needed. He never bought a thing for himself. Every penny he earned was saved to get the price of my freedom from Mr. Spur.
Much obliged to you.
Stay, ma'am. 'Tis well. I sympathize with your desire to purchase your wife and children, and I have offered what I believe to be a fair price. I will not lower the price, Matthew. Do you understand me?
I do understand, Mr. Spur. I come here not to haggle about price, but to seal the arrangement.
Matthew, do you dare to tell me that you have raised 150 pounds? Ne'er jest with me, fellow. A free black hauler of firewood and such. Come, Matthew, do not dally with my time.
Sir, I beg to inform you that I have deposited the full sum of 150 pounds with Mr. Prince at his store. He is a gentleman that has gained the respect of many about the city and will vouch for the full purchase price on my account. We need only to draw up the bill of sale.
Indeed.
Indeed. We agreed that the purchase price for Anne and my 2 children, John and Mary, would be 150 pounds. It is a high price, but it is the price that we agreed on. I believe you to be a gentleman, sir, and I trust that you will hold true to your word.
Matthew, do not impugn my character. I will not stand for such language from a free Negro, even if he be of means.
Master Spur did not want to sell. I don't think he believed that Grandpa Matthew would ever be able to come up with that money. But once Grandpa Matthew bought us, that's me, John and Mary, We moved into his home. For the first time ever, we were like a real family. But Grandpa Matthew was not satisfied. Please. Why do you want more?
What if something happens to me?
What do you mean? Matthew, what's going to happen to you?
What if I'm injured? Couldn't work? If we get ourselves into debt, someone will come along and sell you other children to pay off my debts.
That's not going to happen.
No, Ann? All I did was buy you from Master Spur. You're still a slave. Now a free black man owns you. You're my property. That's not good enough. I have to petition the Governor's Council to have you and the children manumitted, set free. There's no other way. I've worked hard to gain freedom for my wife and children. I cannot fail them now.
You have not failed. They reside safely with you.
They reside with me, but not safely, sir.
But your Grandpa Matthew, he never just leave well enough alone. He goes off and talks to one of the most powerful men in the whole government, President of the Council, Mr. Blair.
Well, Matthew,
Can you imagine
the council
that?
seldom grants
He
petitions
walked
for
right in
manumission,
and talked
even when
with
the
that
petitioner
man
is
face to
substantial.
face.
Sir, you mean that they are unlikely to grant a petition from a free Negro man?
That is the plain speaking of the matter, Matthew. You know that as well as I.
I do. And that's why I ask from you, sir, more than I should.
Speak plainly, Matthew.
Sir, I would ask of you that you submit the petition on my behalf, sir, and that you be my patron before the council.
And you think my efforts will increase the chances of approval?
Aye, sir.
And you may be correct in that, Matthew. You may indeed be correct in that. Well, I think I might first call upon Mr. Nelson and discuss the matter with him, and then perhaps with the governor, before the petition is even presented.
The Governor's Council did not like to give freedom to slaves. Matthew, what's wrong? My God, man, you look like the world's near to an end.
Just come from the clerk's office up at the Capitol building.
And? Is there any word?
Yes, Ann. There's word.
And they turned down our petition. I told you, Matthew, those white dandies don't care nothing about you and me. They don't care nothing about our children. What did they say in that paper?
On the petition of Matthew Ashby, a free mulatto, setting forth that he had 2 children by his present wife, Ann Ashby, while she was a slave to Samuel Spur.
Matthew, what did they say?
Ordered that the said Matthew Ashby have leave to manumit, to set them free.
It was a smart thing your Grandpa Matthew did, and he didn't stop until it was all finished. It was that day, November the 29th, in the year of our Lord, 1769, that I and my children became free.
We're all free now.
You and your children were once slaves,
That's right, Stephen.
but Grandpa Matthew, he bought you and set you free. But my family was never slaves, was we?
Well, not every free Negro was once a slave. There have been quite a few families round about here that have been free as long as anyone knows. And some have done well by it, too.
Like who, Grandma?
You know about the Rollinson family, don't you there?
I hear stories, it's all, Grandma.
And what stories do you hear?
I heard that old man Rawson was a rich shoemaker who lived here in town.
I suppose that's true enough. John Rollinson moved from out in York County here to Williamsburg long about 1760, and he set up a shoemaking shop. Lord, that man could work. And afore long, he had brought in a journeyman shoemaker to help him. And then he bought a slave man who could make shoes. And then his nephew he got in and started working on the business. Why, Lord, it seemed like he had an army of men a-making shoes, he did. Why, when that man died, his will called for them to sell all his belongings and give the money to his wife and children. There was nigh on 3,000 pounds. Can you imagine that much money?
Grandma, I can't even think about that much money.
You say Mr. Rollinson, he bought slaves.
Aye, Stephen, and it's not such an unusual thing. Why, there's a number of our people, free Negroes, I mean, that have bought themselves slaves and made a pretty good living at it, some of them.
You mean they hire their slaves out to work for other people?
Indeed. There was a woman by the name of Lydia Cooper hereabouts. That woman was a real fine cook, she was. She worked for hire at some of the finest homes here in Williamsburg. In fact, she often got paid to go and help cook over at the governor's house when there was something special going on. She owned 2 slaves, 2 men by the name of Doctor and Man.
Lydia Cooper.
Aye, sir.
That man of yours called Doctor has gone astray again. You told me he could handle the moving of furniture in the supper room, and now he's wandered off. I tell you, I'll not pay a single penny for that slackard. You can consider our arrangement void, Mistress Cooper, and when you see that man, Doctor, I suggest you flog him soundly.
My apologies, sir. I'm sorry that you have taken offense. I will send Man for whatever it is that you desire, for he can complete the task.
You said that Doctor would be diligent.
Well, I will tend to Doctor when I see him. Please let me make amends.
Beg pardon, Mr. Marshman. Man is a stout fellow. I vouch for his abilities.
So say you?
Yes.
Well, I suppose I have little choice. We're pressed for time now. Man, come here, lad.
Yes, sir. From that day on, Mr. Marshman hired Lydia Cooper's man whenever he could. And Mistress Cooper, she was the one to profit from it. I dare say she earned a pretty penny off the governor for the services of that slave she had by the name of Man.
It sounds to me like we free Negroes are in all the important businesses in town.
'Tis true. Why, free Negroes run businesses like Mr. Rollinson's shoemaking business. Or there was that Adam Waterford who was a cooper here. You can find free Negroes farming and owning property and owning slaves too. But it's not as easy as it is for a white man.
But if a free Negro can own all of that, and a man like Mr. Rollinson can own that much property, what can the problem be?
Well, we are free Negroes, and that's a good thing. We have our freedom, and we can make our own choices. But it's not as easy to live as a free Negro.
How so?
Well, take the county court, for example.
Yes, ma'am.
Your grandpa, he got arrested once for a fighting.
Grandpa Matthew got arrested and went to court?
That he did. And it wasn't all like you think now. This all happened not long after I met your grandpa, way back in 1760. Grandpa Matthew, his brother John Ashby, and Tom, a slave belonging to Master Prentice, they had gone way out into Upper York County to haul some merchandise for Mr. Prentice, and they had stopped at a small tavern to get themselves a meal at dinner. and some trouble happened.
Matthew Ashby, you have been brought here to answer a charge of assault and battery, a breach of the King's peace. It is our duty to determine if there is enough evidence to indict you upon that charge. How do you answer these charges?
I declare that these charges are false. I defended myself only.
That is not what I understand from these affidavits. It says here you soundly trounced a man named George Tomlinson, who was at peace and enjoying his meal.
I beg your Honor's pardon, but I and my companions were seated at the back stoop. The mistress would not serve our kind with the rest of her patrons. We were enjoying the King's peace and our meal when this Mr. Tomlinson overturned my brother's dish and struck him with it, declaring at the top of his voice that the mistress of the tavern should never serve any slave.
Who were with you, Matthew?
My brother John and Mr. Prentice man Tom.
Do you have a white man to testify to the truth of your story, Matthew?
Nay, sir. Only myself, John, and Tom, sir.
I fear it will not be sufficient. Let me remind you, Matthew, that a Negro may not testify against a white man. It is the law.
Aye, 'tis the law.
The prosecution has Mr. Tomlinson's testimony, and the mistress of the tavern, one Mary James, is also set to appear and testify against you. We have no choice but to indict you on the charge of assault and battery. Mr. Clerk.
What happened?
Well, your grandpa, he spoke to a couple of lawyer men here in town. In the end, they advised him to plead guilty to the charges, even though it was not his fault. Because he was a Negro, the law didn't let him defend himself. He had to pay a 30-shilling fine for assault, and then he had to pay 50 pounds of tobacco for that Mary James woman to come in to testify.
That's not fair.
Well, there's little in this life that is fair, child, especially not for you. Like Grandpa Matthew, you are a free Negro, but a Negro nonetheless, and you will not be treated the same as a white neighbor, even before the law.
I bet it made Grandpa Matthew angry.
That it did, child. But he took no time to dwell on it. He used to tell me, take each day as a new day, and then try and do some good. And that's just what he did. The next day, he woke himself up, declared it a new day, and then went out and did some good.
I wish I had known Grandpa Ashby. He sounds like a great man.
That he was, child. That he was.
So after Grandpa Matthew bought your freedom and went to the council and got you manumitted, that means nobody can take your freedom from you. Ain't that right?
Not exactly, Matt. You and I and Stephen here, every free Negro, have to forever be careful. There are people who want to take our freedom away.
Why, Grandma Ashby?
I don't know, Stephen. I suppose there are people who believe that there should be no sons and daughters of Africa in Virginia except those what are slaves. So you lads should never stray far from home.
What do you mean?
Well, son, if you stay here in this community, here, near and about Williamsburg, well, there are good white people who know you and will vouch for you. So if someone were to take you up as a runaway slave, then a Mr. Prentice or a Mr. Blair, well, they know our family. They will vouch that you were free-born and not a slave.
All right. Good day, Mr. Prentice, Mr. Blair. I've dreamed of wandering up to Fredericksburg to see what life's like up there.
Who do you know up in Fredericksburg?
Not a soul.
And what if the sheriff there decides he doesn't like the look of you? You know he can do that. He can decide he doesn't like the way you look, decide that you just might be a runaway, and arrest you. Who would help you?
Not a soul.
Indeed.
But that would be kidnapping.
'Tis true enough, but it happens. Fredericksburg is no place for you to wander up to.
No, I suppose it ain't.
You have to always be careful. There are many ways for a free Negro to lose their freedom. I've known men to sell their freedom to pay a debt.
Really? I can't imagine.
Oh, but it happens. I remember a man by the name of Henry Cook. He was born over by Gloucester way, and I suppose he was free from the day he was born. Henry knew a bit of carpentry, and Grandpa Matthew would take him on as a helper when there was a big job to be done. And then, in the winter of 1768, the smallpox came to Williamsburg. Lord, I shiver just to think about it. Smallpox is a deadly sickness. Many people died from it. And when Henry took ill, he feared he would die. Henry was willing to give anything, even his freedom, to save himself.
Oh, Lord, what's to become of me?
I will look in on you, Henry, and do what I can, but you have no money to pay for the medicines.
I'll find a way to pay you, Doctor. That I shall swear.
I know you're sincere, Henry, but I need something substantial before I can agree to treat you with the medicines.
Substantial, sir? What mean you by substantial?
Well, Henry, if you were to sell yourself into an indenture, you could raise the money. You're a likely young lad, and a few years' labor would pay off the debt.
Sell myself, Doctor, sir? You mean give up my freedom?
Aye, Henry, it sounds harsh. But if I cure you of the smallpox, you will have a life. And it would be nothing to give, say, 5 years of service for your life, now would it, Henry?
5 years, sir? 5 years? Oh, my Lord!
But Henry had little choice. He sold himself to Dr. Galt for 5 years' service, all to pay for the cure to the smallpox. Now, do you think if Henry had been white, Dr. Galt would have given him the cure on credit?
It makes you wonder.
Aye, child, it does. But it didn't take long for Henry to see what he had done. Before the year was out, the doctor had sold Henry to a man by the name of William Flood, way up there in Westmoreland County, miles from Henry's home and family.
What did he do?
Well, after about 2 years of working on a plantation up there in Westmoreland County, Henry, he couldn't take no more. He ran away. He was a fugitive.
Did they catch him?
Oh, yes. Master Flood, he catched him. And Henry, he ran away again. And that man Flood, he catched him again.
Did they punish him?
Indeed. Each time Henry ran away, they added more years to his indenture.
Oh, I can't do this. Father! Father!
Poor Henry died in bondage. They say he was paying off his debts. But he had paid for his debts more than once after all the time that boy served. It killed him, it did. It killed him.
I didn't know they could punish you by making you a slave.
Yes, they can. You know Cleo, Master Thompson's cook?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, she comes here from way out in Dunmore County. She tells a story about a man she knows there named Sam. He bought his freedom from his master. But then there were some white men in the community who accused him of tempting their slaves to run out with the Indians.
To the Indians?
Indeed. There ain't much any place to run off to here, and so there are people that go out to live with the Indians. Well, these white men, they accused Sam, arrested him, gave him a trial and everything.
You mean they tried him for helping runaways?
Aye, and they convicted him too. And for his punishment, they sold him back into slavery.
But no one's tried to take your freedom away from you, has they?
I was afraid once. I thought your grandpa had done us in.
What do you mean?
Well, child, Grandpa Matthew, he used to hide runaways.
Really?
Indeed he did. And he came close to getting us caught more than once.
Runaway? Who do you seek, Sheriff? I will help if I can.
Young fella, about 19 years of age. Belongs to Matthew Mays of Dinwiddie County.
A tall, spare lad with a scar right here on his jaw?
Aye, the very one. Seen him about, have you?
Can I say, Sheriff? I heard he was about town early in the week. They say that he was out to catch a boat and take to sea.
That's not what I hear. I heard he was delayed here, in your house.
Pray tell. You see he's not here.
You're a sly man, Ashby. And I think you've got him hid here, on your property.
Nay, sir. I'll never break the king's peace.
I will have that look around.
Of course, sir. You see the house. There's nowhere to hide in here. Look about the yard and through the shed if you must. I will be pleased to have you see for yourself.
Oh, that I will, Ashby. That I will. And if I do find that you've been keeping a runaway, it will not go well for you and your family. Not at all.
I understand, Sheriff. But have no fear. Have no fear.
My word, it scares me just to think about it.
And it scared me too. But Grandpa Matthew, he believed we must do all we can to help those in need. Never turned out a runaway, no sir.
Even if it might get him put in jail?
Even though he could lose his own freedom?
Even if it was dangerous to his whole family, he would have us first to help those in need.
He was mighty of a man, wasn't he, Grandma? Mighty of a man.